Welcome back. In this session, I'll give you an overview about Synapse Link and then we'll look deeper into Synapse Link for Cosmos DB, but let's start with trying to understand the need for Synapse Link. Most businesses have separate architectures for transactional and analytical processing. The transactional architectures are generally designed to deal with individual transactions quickly and efficiently. For example, inserting a single record into a transaction table when a customer makes a credit card transaction. Whereas the architectures for analytical processing are designed to deal with large amounts of data, including historical information used for reporting and identifying patterns. As a result, the data in OLTP systems are stored in formats suitable for individual transactions, that is, they are stored as rows optimized for transactional reads and writes. Examples of storage could be Azure SQL, Cosmos DB, etc. On the other hand, the data in OLAP systems are stored as columns or optimized for large analytical queries. Examples of column formats are Parquet and ORC, and also there are databases such as Amazon Redshift and Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which supports column store storage. This creates a need for a process that copies the data from the storage used by OLTP architecture to a suitable storage for the analytical processing. Traditionally, companies have created ETL processes to copy this data at regular intervals. These batch jobs needed to be scheduled to run outside of the business so that they didn't affect the performance of their transactional systems. The main drawback of this architecture is that businesses needed to create complex ETL jobs to copy large amounts of data. This creates a delay in being able to run the OLAP queries and make business decisions. Azure Synapse Link is Microsoft's answer to this problem. Azure Synapse Link is a cloud-native hybrid, transactional and analytical processing capability that enables businesses to run near real-time analytics over operational data without impacting the performance of the transactional systems. Currently, Azure Synapse Link is available for Azure Cosmos DB, Dataverse, and SQL Server 2022. In this course, we'll take a closer look at Synapse Link for Cosmos DB. Let's assume that your transactional system is using Azure Cosmos DB to serve to the business applications to support the needs of the transactional processing application. The data is stored in a transactional store. The data is stored as rows in the Cosmos DB container so that the data stored is optimized for transactional reads and writes. As we discussed before, increasingly businesses are interested in this data to perform big data analytics and machine learning in near real time. The traditional approach of using ETL introduces latency to the data as well as complexity to the data pipelines. This is where Synapse Links comes into play. When you enable Synapse Link, the data in the transaction stored will be replicated to the analytical store and the data in the analytical still will be in columnar format, which is optimized for querying analytical query engines. The replication from transactional store to the analytical store is carried out by an auto-sync process, which is fully managed by Azure. This is an asynchronous process which typically replicates the data from transactional store to the analytical store within 2 minutes. In some circumstances, it may take up to 5 minutes, for example, for a shared throughput Cosmos DB database with many containers. We now have an analytical store which is optimized for analytical queries, and also it can be queried independently of the transaction. So what we mean by this is that queries against the analytical store will not be using any of the request units or the resources provided for OLTP application. We don't have to write an ETL jobs, and Azure takes care of everything for us, which is great. We now need to access this data from Synapse. In order to do that, we need to create a link service in Synapse to the Cosmos DB database via the link service. We can either use the Spark pool or serverless SQL pool to interact with Cosmos DB. As you know by now, we can use Spark pool to do machine learning or big data analytics and use serverless pool to perform any data exploration and BI reporting. We can connect reporting tools such as Power BI to connect to the serverless SQL pool too. So that's a quick summary of the Synapse Link for Cosmos DB and how it fits into a data integration solution. Let's now go through the benefits of using Synapse Link for Cosmos DB. With Synapse Link, we don't need to create custom ETL jobs to bring the transactional data for analytical use cases. Synapse Link handles the replications and it handles inserts, updates, as well as deletes to the operational data and applies them to the analytical store. It's a fully managed service as it takes care of compute, storage, and throughput required to perform the replications without any downtime, with the replication of data happening between 2 and 5 minutes. We can now perform near real-time analytics and reporting of the operational data. We don't need to provide any additional compute capacity, that is request units, to the Cosmos DB database to minimize the impact on the transaction system, unlike the traditional approach. Azure takes care of everything, and the provision to request units for the transaction system is solely used for that purpose, and there is no impact due to the replication. The replication takes care of any schema changes to the data. We do not need to perform any ETL changes to take out of this. And finally, Synapse Link provides native integration of Cosmos DB with Synapse Spark Pool and serverless SQL Pool. Let's now go through the limitations so that you have a comprehensive understanding about this capability offered by Synapse Link. Azure Link for Cosmos DB is only supported for SQL API and MongoDB API. It's not available for Gambling API, Cassandra API, and Table API. Accessing the Cosmos DB analytical store using the Azure Synapse dedicated SQL pool is currently not supported. You can only use Spark Pool or the serverless SQL pool. Enabling Synapse Link on existing Cosmos DB containers is only supported for SQL API accounts. Synapse Link can be enabled, as we said, on new containers for both SQL API and MongoDB API account. Backup and restore of your data in Analytical Store is not currently supported. Finally, custom partitioning is not generally available. For example, you cannot partition your data in the Analytical Store by partitioned folders on dates, times, etc. as we would in a data lake. That's the end of this session, and I hope this has given you an overview of Synapse Link.